Professor Breen Brown's research shows that vulnerability fosters good emotional and mental health. It is a sign of courage. We become more resilient and brave when we embrace who we truly are and what we are feeling. The Vulnerable Scientist podcast is a space for scientists to tell their honest and authentic stories. I am your host, Sarah Nyakeri, who happens to be a scientist, informal science communicator, and I help scientists create personal websites. If you want to support this show, go to www.patreon.com/thevulnerable-scientist. You can also follow this podcast on all social media platforms at TV Scientist Pod. Hi everyone, welcome to the Vulnerable Scientist podcast. This is your host Sarah Nyakeri, and today I have Lilian with me to tell us her journey in science. Hi Lilian.
Hi Sarah, I'm so glad to be here today. Finally.
Yeah, finally. We've been, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened last time though, but anyway, I can't remember what
I
happened.
don't want to speak about my country so badly, but load shedding happened and I wasn't really sure when it would happen, but it started during our session. You remember, so I couldn't connect.
Yeah.
But then it took a long time for me to finally reschedule it. But I'm glad we're here now.
Yeah. That's the thing. Finally, it's happening. I have been curious about to hear your story, so maybe introduce yourself to someone who does not know you.
Okay. So, like I said, I'm a bit shy and often I don't know how to talk too much about myself. But hi everyone, my name is Lilian Mbaisi. I'm a PhD student at Rhodes University Research Unit in bioinformatics. My main research interests are mostly on vector control, vector biology, and a lot of computational research. And I think what else? My journey started a while back, so there's a lot to how I came or how I was led into this path that I'm in and how that went. But then I feel like where I am right now, this is what I'm really passionate about, and it's very interesting how I got here from where I was and how I keep growing into now the career that is practically my calling. I would say that.
Wow,
Yeah.
I've never heard someone in bioinformatics say that. Like it's their calling. This is the first. Mostly people say it's a passion or they like it or they've come to like it, but for you it's a bit different. I'm very curious to know what your story is about and how interestingly you got into bioinformatics as a career path. But before that, let us know where you grew up. Tell us more about your background before you even thought about education and all that, like seriously thought about education.
Okay. So I grew up in Nairobi, Kenya. Um, Actually, before that, the first few years of my life, I used to stay somewhere just the outskirts of Nairobi. But then, in the middle of it all, we managed to come to Nairobi with my parents, and that's where I essentially grew up. I was a very quiet kid. Maybe my dad would beg to differ, but I feel like I was a very quiet kid and
Okay.
I loved to read and I was very explorative. So I always had this question of how things work. And my parents, they were both teachers at the time. So they were very keen on education and sort of nurturing my skills and everything. So apart from, yeah, I am a firstborn out of three kids. I have one brother and one sister. Both of them, interestingly, are also in the path of science. So extremely different fields, not biological, but it's just something that I guess was bred into us. by our
Okay.
parents.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I grew up in Nairobi. This is I don't know if you know where Komarok is, but most of your listeners probably don't. But
Yeah.
then it's sort of a middle class
Mm.
environment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, I spent most of my life. That's what I grew knowing, and most of my childhood involved mostly going to school and home and reading, and like my brother and sister, and usually I make fun of them because I don't know how to ride a bike, but they do because they were very outdoorsy people.
Oh.
But for me,
Mm-mm.
I usually just loved staying with my thoughts and, processing just everything that's going on to my head. So I'd rather spend most of my time with my books and
Mm.
journaling. I actually discovered that I started journaling pretty early in life when just the other day my brother was sending me screenshots of an old journal of mine and
Mm.
the things
How
that
old?
I documented in them. Um, Around 9, 10, when I was 9 or
Wow.
10 years old, so pretty young, and I had all these things in my head, which was really interesting. But one of the things that actually sprang out from the journal was when when you're a kid, you're very imaginative and you
Mm.
don't know exactly how life would be, you don't know
Yeah.
the challenges or the setbacks, so you're free to wander in your head. So in this specific journal entry, I had talked about how I want to be a scientist, but
Ah.
obviously as a kid I didn't know what kind of scientist I
That
wanted to
is.
be. But
Mm.
there was a mention of, I want to be an astronaut, I want to see Mars, I want to be able to um, heal people. I see people suffering. I want to be a doctor, but I
Mm.
also want to. So in my head, I wanted to do all these things, and I knew that all these things were possible. There wasn't just one career for me, it was something that I wanted to do. See the world, see outside the world, be with people close to me, local people, be able to improve their health, heal the sick, and also just do more. So that was an interesting thing that my brother sent me, and I was like, so I was in this path all through my life, but I never realized it until now. This is when it's really manifesting that what I had in my head is happening. Obviously, not the astronaut bit, but
Mm.
the science bit.
Science bit. Yeah.
Mm,
Oh, this is
mhm,
great. I love this.
mhm.
Like, oh my goodness. Like, are you still journaling now?
I try as much as possible, but now because
Mm.
things are mainly just online and the soft copy things, so I
Mm.
type a lot. I have a journal entry in my laptop, but I
Oh.
would have preferred to have like books where I can actually write down, because writing
Ah.
down, there's just an art to it that
Yes.
isn't comparable to, yeah, typing
Oh my
down.
God. I
Yeah.
relate so
Mhm.
much to what you just said because I
Mhm.
write more than I type. Okay, I type, of course,
Mhm.
a lot more, but I prefer
Mhm.
writing. Like,
Mhm.
I really love writing,
Yeah,
like
it's
on my
just
book.
different. Yeah,
Yeah.
putting words to paper, it's
Mm.
very different. Yeah.
It's a different experience. I don't know. I've tried typing away my thoughts. It's a bit different
Mhm.
unless I'm typing on phone, but typing on a
Mhm.
laptop, it's a bit different. But
Mhm.
when I write just like literally on the diary, I have so many diaries,
Mhm.
diary kind of books, diary
Mhm.
kind of books like those books that have empty spaces in the dates where it's not like a
Yeah.
calendar. So I like that.
Mhm.
I even now
Mhm.
I have one that I'm writing on what you just, I'm just taking notes of what you saying so that I remember what
Yeah.
to ask you. So yeah, talking of asking you, you've said that your parents instill some sort of thing.
Mhm.
Eh, That's why all of you guys are in science. What is that?
I think from I would say from the time that we were able to um decipher what's right or wrong. So I
Mm,
wouldn't say from the time that we were born, but from the
mm,
time that we were big enough to know what's going on.
yeah.
Our parents already instilled in us the spirit of or the belief that education is really key, it's very important. Not to say that they limited us from venturing into other skills, which are also very important, but them growing up from both of them are actually firstborns in their respective families. And then growing up from that and being teachers, they had this passion for education and knowing just how important it was and pushing us to try and um, get that passion to keep learning every time. Now, that's what they instilled in us. And my parents actually have in their house, they have this room with just that's full of books, all types of books, historical books, fictional books, any type of book that you might be interested in. They just have this whole collection, and my dad keeps getting new books every other month. And it used to be very, I guess, when you get so many books and it sort of clutters the room, you're asking, is there an end to it? But then my parents would be like, there's no end to learning. So even if you feel like you've read too much already, there's still more to learn, more to read. So in the past, I was more keen on fictional stories because I love to read. But then with my parents' repository of books, I also learned how just how much interesting historical books are, and what my dad used to do to keep us interested in like history, like Kenyan history or African history, is he would give us nicknames based on interesting characters from these historical books that he'd read. And now with that, we'd be curious, why is dad calling us this? And then we'd want to read these historical books to see what did this person do and what character does dad see in me that is portrayed in this
To
book.
that person.
So yeah, so just having that passion to keep reading and keep learning and not just focused on fictional, but also you're going to historical facts, that things that really happened, or you're going to now scientific facts where you're reading about the history of malaria, or you're reading about how HIV came about and the sort of things that that have been done to sort of control HIV, how the virus keeps evading drugs. So with that kind of exposure to these books, I think that's what triggered us to be sort of really interested in now science, just learning how things come about. And it's interesting, maybe my brother and sister have a different journey or connection to the books that we have in my dad's library. But for me, I found that a lot of the books that I used to resonate with were mostly scientific books that he had in his collection. So I would go through most of them and just see, especially the biological sciences books, and just look around and see what's going on, what diseases are coming up, or just being curious of how the heart works. Why does it beat like this? What is it? Why doesn't it stop? Just the normal questions that kids have. And we were lucky enough to have books in my dad's library that could answer most of these questions. And this was way before internet was like a thing where you think of
You could
something
just
and you're there Googling what is it.
yeah.
So you have this whole book that takes you through the journey, through the motions. Yeah.
You are oh my god, I can imagine how much information that you have in your head right now. Like if you started reading that early and all these
Mhm.
questions, like all these kinds of books, fictional, educational, um
Mhm.
it's historical. That's pretty interesting to hear that. Like,
Mhm.
my relation with books was a bit different. Early on, it was
Mhm.
different from what it is right now. Early on, my parents used to sell books, and
Mhm.
so of course, for before them selling the books, they have to read the book. So there was that culture of reading, but and there was this room that was full of books, and people used to come because they were the administrator. My dad was the administrator of books around for people to sell books. So there were there's this whole room that was full of books, and I did not like that room, but for some weird reason I used to stay there. I was the first one. I am the first one. But when I feel like I need to be on my own, I'll just go to that room and just look for books that are interesting, that have pictures or that have an interesting font. That's what I'll read. Like, you know, Reader's Digest?
Yes, I do. We actually had like Reader's Digest in my parents' library.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Uh-huh.
that's the one I remember. That's the one I remember reading. Like always, like
Mm.
savagely looking for.
I,
Is
I
there
I
a new
used to
one?
yeah, I
Mm.
used to like the sections with the jokes in Reader's
Yeah.
Digest. So I used to
Uh,
like go through the jokes and yeah.
Even me, I never used to read the whole book. I'll just go to the interesting parts that I like. But I, I guess I didn't have like a crazy culture with books. Even now, I feel like
Mm.
you know, there's a comment that you said that you see it as a sort of, I don't know, source of litter of some sort.
Mhm.
And now we have a whole corridor full of
Mm.
books because there's no more space to put the books. Um,
Mm.
like they
I
just.
relate with that. I know we've had these conversations with where you can hear mom talking to my
Mm,
dad, and
mm,
she's like, "You keep getting books, but there's so many books. They're
to
seeping
read.
into like the corridor and the
Yeah.
living room. It's like there's no end to it." Yeah.
Oh, for me, I think I'm the one actually who came up with that. I was like, oh, this is so much. There's no more space for anything. It's just books. So I
Mhm.
was like,
Mhm.
then I thought, the corridor is too big. I think we can fix some books over there. So there are two
Mm.
parts of the corridor that are full of, like, from down to up. It's just books
Mhm.
going upwards. And I'm actually thinking of making a, what is it called, a bookshelf that is on the
Mhm.
wall to have a better arrangement of those books. Anyway, I've
Mm.
never had I've never had this conversation with anyone who growing up this so too many books in their
Yeah.
house. But for me, it's different.
We're
You used to
surrounded by books.
indulge more on them, but for me,
Mhm.
I'm not as much. Not as
Mhm.
much. Not as much as
Mhm.
you say it. Not as much. I of course, used to read, but not as crazy reading. Wow. So
Mhm.
I now at least someone who's listening can get to know you. There's a way you know someone who reads. Like
Mhm.
have a very wide, I don't know, view of the world compared to the people who do not
Mhm.
necessarily read a lot, especially a wide range of books, not just one kind of book.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
So
Mhm.
what do you remember one nickname that your dad gave you, that you had a interesting, when you read about that person, it was interesting,
Um,
or you can remember?
um, off the top of my head, I cannot remember,
Mm-hmm.
but one I remember is the one that he gave my sister,
Mm-hmm.
and that was Matip Tip. I can't remember what Matip Tip did, but he's a historical figure
Mm-hmm.
from the coast of Kenya. So
Mm.
probably your listeners can go through some historical content and find out what Matip Tip did. But yeah, that
Okay.
was a funny nickname that really stuck. And up
Mm.
till now, we still call my sister Matip Tip.
Oh, tip tip,
Yeah,
tip tip.
yeah, Tip Tip.
Oh, okay. That one I'll
Yeah.
find out. I'm actually curious about that name. Okay, so would you say that you were introverted, or you are introverted, or what would you say about your personality when it comes to? Because you mentioned you used to stay at home.
Hmm.
Mm,
Yeah, I'm very introverted, but
mm,
it's something I've been really working on
mm,
from I think just a few years back when I realized that now it gets to a point where you cannot, especially in the scientific world, you cannot just be very closed off
mm,
and not network with people because you're introverted. But yeah, I'm very introverted. I love having my own space and doing things around my own space. It's
Mm,
usually a bit daunting to be out there or be in front of a crowd talking.
mm,
That's
mm,
that was one of my biggest fear, but I feel like over time,
mm,
having just grown into this space where you realize that so this is the career you want to have, and you
mm,
with science you need to be able to communicate properly with people and effectively, and not just the scientists out there. You also need to be able to interact with local people on the
mm,
ground.
mm,
So I realized, I felt the need that I needed to sort of get out of my comfort zone, out of
mm.
this box or cocoon that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to put myself into positions that normally I wouldn't be very comfortable in, trying to start up conversations with people probably in my field or out of my field, just to see the field. And it's usually very interesting to see someone else's point of view from what you think, because
Yeah.
I feel like as introverts you
Mm,
usually already set in your headspace. You already have this sort of view of things, and now you don't have the exposure to other people who would tell you another perspective to certain things. But then when you get into a conversation with other people, then you're like, it's sort of revolutionary because it opens up your eyes to like this whole new world that you didn't know existed, that
mm,
oh, this is actually possible. Like uh, okay, you're seeing how my thought process is, but you also have this new idea that actually makes sense to my
mm,
thought process, and it's very exciting. It's a very exciting, I feel like, adventure where you're
mm.
getting to know people, and people are actually understanding what you're doing,
Yeah.
and you're able to have conversations that spark up even more questions that are interesting to find an answer to. And I guess that's how research works, where
Mm,
you're constantly learning and bouncing off ideas
mm.
against each other, and it just grows from there.
I love that. I'm sure someone who's listening who's also an introvert can, I don't know, can sort of relate and can maybe get some encouragement out of that, because I
Mm-hmm.
feel even me for some time I used to think like I don't know, when I realized like being in science you need to talk to people for you
Mm-hmm.
to grow into it properly, but um I I don't know. I started doing the way you're saying. You just do things that are out of your comfort zone. Then you just realize how good
Mm-hmm.
you can actually be at it,
Mm-hmm.
by just getting out of that comfort zone. Of course, you can. Of course, you can. You won't like be always doing that. Like you'll have your
Yeah.
downtime and just be by yourself as
Mm-hmm.
you love. But there are those moments that with time, when you keep on doing it, you become even more better at it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can give an example of chapati. I never used to
Mm-hmm.
like chapati. I never used to like chapati. Okay, I still don't, I'm not really a fan of chapati, but I never really used to like chapati to the extent that I was never interested to know how to cook chapati. Then it
Mm-hmm.
happened that I started living on my own. Then
Mm-hmm.
um it happened that I had this chapati like home
Mm-hmm.
late. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing that is remaining is the chapati, what is it called, flour, and the
Mm-hmm.
ugali flour. But now
Mm-hmm.
ugali, you can't eat ugali on its own, right? So the only thing
Yeah.
that makes sense to cook right now is something that has dough in it. So then the
Mm-hmm.
most, and of course I don't have like the rest of the things that needs to cook mandazi with, so I have to cook chapati. Like I have no option, and I can
Mm-hmm.
always make some black tea and all that and have
Mm-hmm.
my supper. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to teach myself how to cook chapati, and these days I'm really good at it, by the way. And it is coming out of wanting to get off that comfort zone. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, now let me do something that I will be uncomfortable doing and see how it goes. And you just realize, oh, you can actually be good at it. It's just that I still, um, if I feel like in my life, my normal life, there's something that I'm struggling doing, I would engage in doing it because I want to feel oh, I can actually do this thing that I'm struggling with if I can do this,
Yeah.
like for example chapati. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
I
That's a
love
very
like
interesting analogy. I liked it. And you're the first Kenyan I had who doesn't like chapatis. So.
yeah, usually that weird. Yeah, but now I don't love
Mm.
it, but I enjoy like doing because
Mm.
it's something I've learned and it's something that it gets me out of my comfort zone. Like if I feel like
Mhm.
there's this thing that I need to do, but it's not me, but I have to do it, I'm
Mhm.
like, let me do something small. Let me bake a
Yeah.
cake. I even learned making small cakes, just basic.
Oh, nice.
Like I don't
Mhm.
even take cakes, you know. I don't even
Mhm.
in weddings, I don't go for the cake. I even like
Mhm.
no, I'm not. But now I do something out of my comfort zone so that I can do that other thing that is out of my comfort zone, so that I feel, oh, I can
Yeah.
actually do this thing that is not me. Yeah, so in case of
Mhm.
introvertedness, you can just say, I can do this, I can do this. No, you can't do it. It's just that you have to choose
Yeah. Yeah. You can.
this small
Mhm. You
moment.
just have to get into that headspace where you're
Yes.
able to take now that step out of the comfort zone. That's
Yeah.
very